Greetings, dear listeners. Hope you're all doing well. Well, here, as promised, is another yarn from C.B. Colby's book, The Weirdest People in the World. The Weirdest People in the World by C.B. Colby. And this one is called The Canewdon Ghost. The Canewdon Ghost, pardon me. Canewdon. Canewdon. C-A-N-E-W-D-O-N. Canewdon. Well, back in 1895, a London solicitor by the name of Richard Needham went to the village of Canewdon, which is situated in South Essex. He went there because he was suffering from tuberculosis, and he felt that a spell in the French country air would help him towards his recovery. So he rented a cottage on the edge of town, and he hired a local woman to do for him. To do for him. In other words, to cook his meals and to do some light housekeeping around the cottage. Now, this housekeeper was always asking him, "Are you sure you're going to be okay being alone in the cottage at night?" Or she would ask him if he felt safe staying there. Wasn't he afraid to stay there overnight? But she would never give him any reasons for her concern, so he just kind of ignored it. But every night at dusk, she went home. Well, one night, after he'd been there 2 or 3 days, Needham was sitting in his kitchen reading a book. Probably not this one, but he was reading a book when he heard somebody trying to open the back door to the cottage. He could hear somebody fumbling at the door, which fortunately was locked and bolted. But he realized that the front door was unlocked, unbolted. So he hurried through the cottage and locked and bolted it just as he heard somebody outside fumbling, trying to gain admittance. Now, Needham was a slight man. He had had tuberculosis, he was still ill, and he would have been no match for a burglar or for anybody that was wanting to do him harm. But he was also a brave man. So he threw open the door and said, "Who's there?" And he looked around, but there was nobody there. Nobody. Nothing. All he could see was the lane leading up to the cottage in the moonlight. Well, this went on every night for a week, but Needham didn't tell his housekeeper, and he just put it down to some of the village lads, some of the bad lads of Canewdon, having some cruel fun with him. Cruel fun by trying to scare him. Cruel fun. Cruel. Remember that. That's actually important. Well, after he'd been in Canewdon about 10 days, the local doctor invited Needham over for dinner. And after dinner, they had a game of chess, which went on till long after the darkness had taken control. And so the doctor insisted on taking Needham home in his pony cart. But when the pony got to the lane leading to the cottage, it stopped dead and refused to budge. It would not move. Well, Needham, wanting to spare his host's embarrassment, stepped down and said he was quite happy to walk the short distance back to the cottage. After all, the night air would do him some good. And so he headed up the lane, alone, in the dark. But up ahead, he could see a small, bright light off in the distance, which he thought must be somebody with a lantern. So he hurried forward to see who they were, but when he got to the spot, again, there was no one. There was nothing. Well, he'd almost reached the front door of the cottage when out of the shadows stepped a figure. Stepped a figure out into the bright, silvery moonlight. The figure of a woman without a head. She didn't have a head. Well, Needham turned on his heels and he ran back to the village. he crashed into the local inn, the Checkers, and demanded a room for the night. And then he went into the bar room and he downed 3 brandies in rapid succession. 3 brandies in rapid succession, which was completely out of character for him. When he finally got his breath and his composure back, he told the other people assembled in the bar room what had happened, and they burst into laughter. It seems everybody in Canewdon knew about the headless ghost, and they were actually taking bets to see how long it was before Needham was frightened out of his wits. Now, one wag in the bar actually had the nerve to tell Needham, Sir, perhaps the ghost is lonely, and perhaps she wants to do for you. Perhaps she wants to be your housekeeper. Why don't you let her in?" Well, we'll never find out if the ghost, the Canewdon ghost, the headless ghost, she had apparently been the victim of murder, her husband cutting her head off in a drunken, angry, jealous rage one night in their home, which was the very cottage in which Needham was currently residing. We'll never know if the ghost was lonely, if she just was trying to go home to the place that she'd called home when she had a head. We'll never know if she wanted to be Needham's housekeeper, because the next day he went back to London and never returned. Now, this is a pretty basic, straightforward ghost story. You know, headless ghost, decapitated by jealous husband, haunting the house they lived in, scaring a lonely bachelor. It's a pretty basic ghost story. Nothing special, really, but it does have a certain charm, doesn't it? So let me know your impressions of it in the comments below. And this is only the second time I've told this story. Only the second time in my life I've told it. Because the first time I told it, when I was about 10, I made the mistake of telling it at a family gathering where my mother thought I said that the local boys were having cool fun at Needham's expense. Cool fun, not cruel fun, cool fun, which led to a public lecture on bad boys and girls that played pranks on poor, innocent, unsuspecting adults, which then morphed into a more general lecture on my many foibles and failings, of which I had very many when I was 10 years old, as well as my tendency to hang out with a bad crowd. And various other relatives and adults who were there also joined in on this taking of my personal inventory, all intended to get me back on the path of righteousness. The path of righteousness in those days being, what will the neighbors think? What will the neighbors think? No, they didn't worry too much about your self-esteem back then, even though my mother kept saying to me, well, as a matter of fact, my mother was always saying to me, why can't you be a nice boy? Why can't you be a nice boy? So no, self-esteem was not particularly on the menu back during the 1960s. So as you can see, I probably have a certain prejudice against this story, but let me know what you think in the comments. As well, in the description, you'll find a bunch of links for further information about Canewdon, which is apparently one of the most haunted towns in the United Kingdom and has been home historically to a coven of witches. It was so evil that the Witchfinder General, Matthew Hopkins, was even afraid to set foot in the place. So, check those links out. If this is your first visit to my channel, my name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring cryptids such as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So please consider subscribing and help me to attain my goal of 2,021 subs in 2021. And allow me also to take this opportunity, dear listeners, to wish you all a Happy New Year. I know that this has been a pretty bad year for a lot of people, and hopefully 2021 will be better. 2020 for me was fine. I've actually come through it in flying colors. So my hope for you is that in 2021, you all will enjoy some of the good fortune that I've enjoyed during the past 12 months. So, till December 31st at midnight, cheers!